to a Hope 1032 podcast.
The Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore, because life's just better with a book.
Welcome to the Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore from the Centre for Public Christianity. Natasha is back from her nuptials and joining us from her new home in South Australia. Welcome, Natasha.
Thanks, Katrina.
And we're also joined by Katrina Clifford from The Greenhouse. Hi, Katrina.
Hello.
Well, I think first, before we get into this podcast, Natasha, how was the wedding? We have to know.
Oh, it was really lovely. It all went well. Nobody got COVID.
Yay!
Pretty much everybody was able to come, and, things went smoothly, and it didn't even rain very much. And, it was a suitable amount of stressful, but we got married. Yay.
Yay, that is awesome. Today we are doing an episode that we have never done before, romance novels. Yes, we have been reading books about love, which seemed appropriate since we have a newlywed with us this morning. So Natasha has been reading The Giant Dark, the debut novel by Sarvat Hasin, a novel inspired by the ancient Greek tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice. Aida is a next-level rock star, one of the defining artists of her age. She reunites with Ehsan, the love of her youth, and consequently disappears from public view. But her obsessive fans aren't willing to let her go. It's a story of love and fame and the devastating effects of using a lover as a muse. Katrina Clifford has been reading The Paris Library by Janet Skeslien Charles, a World War II romance based on the true story of the heroic librarians at the American Library in Paris. Odile is a young and ambitious woman who joins the resistance using the only weapon she has, books. Told in two timelines, we meet her again in Montana in 1983, where her friendship with a young teenager brings out a dark secret from her past. And I have just finished reading the newly crowned Caleb Prize winner for fiction, In Want of a Wife by Meredith Resce. This is the second book in a series about meddling mother Louise Brooker, a regency romance author and chronic matchmaker who just can't help interfering in the lives of her three children. Second daughter Chloe, a capable feminist emergency nurse, doesn't want to be set up with a young, handsome, successful lawyer, but she does need legal advice on the small matter of a speeding ticket she's taking to court. So that is all coming up in our very romantic candlelit episode of the Hope Book Club. But first, let's hear from The Giant Dark by Sarvat Hasin.
We were used to thinking of ourselves as a secret society. Others might listen to Aida's music or go to the gigs, buy her t-shirts, but ours was a rarefied love. In a crowd, it was easy to separate us. Rows of us in the front, there since dawn. Ice packs on our feet, coal smeared around our eyes, shivering in anticipation, crying with relief when we saw her. Some of us travelled with her, hopping from city to city to see her in different towns. The lucky ones saw her every time she came through our towns or the closest cities, taking extra shifts to afford the tickets, living on instant ramen noodles and toast for weeks before. She was worth it every time. Blacked out stage, shift of energy when she walked on. Even if we couldn't yet see her, there's a crackle in the air. Thin glow of the spotlight haloing around her. The drum kiss, the beginning of the beats in our belly. This was our church. If she had asked us to get on our knees, we would have done. Would have rolled down our bodies in stadiums and fields everywhere and bent our knees, heads bowing till she passed a benevolent hand over them.
And that's from The Giant Dark by debut novelist Sarvat Hasin. Natasha Moore has been reading this rock star novel. Hi, Natasha.
Hey, how you doing?
So what got you onto this book, Natasha?
Well, maybe appropriately for the episode, it was a gift from my boyfriend at the time, last Christmas, now husband, and I read it on our honeymoon. I think basically he bought it because the cover is amazing. Like, it's a really gorgeous kind of stylized cover, and like it sounds really cool. It's a retelling of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. And, that could have been awesome, or it could have been a dismal failure, but it was awesome.
Oh, good. That's so good to hear. Very romantic that you read it on your honeymoon. I think that just really is the icing on the cake here, the icing on the wedding cake, perhaps. But what does,
nice.
what does the title actually refer to? I didn't understand the reference of The Giant Dark.
I think The Giant Dark might be death. Or it might be kind of depression or meaninglessness, or, I feel like there's some interpretation there, right, to be had, or else I just missed it. But the story is about basically this rock star, this incredibly famous, beloved musician, young musician called Ida, or Aida. It's Aida. I like people to be able to picture the name as I say it. And so she has kind of achieved cult status with her fans. So it's about her. It's about the boyfriend who broke up with her 10 years ago, Ehsan, who she still kind of thinks about. And they rekindle their romance in the course of the novel. And it's kind of from their two perspectives, but also from the perspective of what is the equivalent of the Greek chorus in the myth, which is her public, her incredibly committed fan base who are obsessed with her and think she's just the best thing ever. And so that feels both really modern, because it's very, the serious stands, like the groupies, and also kind of has that like mythic, anonymous, crowdsourced feel, which is like, so the kind of the modern and the ancient works really well in this, I think.
So, Natasha, I'm not really that familiar with Greek mythology myself. Wasn't really my area of interest when I was at uni. So can you give us the skinny version of the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice?
So Orpheus is like this wonderful musician. He's the son of Apollo, who gifts him a lyre, and I think he charms the animals and all that kind of thing with his music. And he falls in love with Eurydice. And I think they get married, and then she is bitten by a snake and dies and descends to the underworld. And he is like, I can't live without her. And so by the power of his music, he kind of charms his way into the underworld. And the god of Hades says to him that he can take her back to the land of the living so long as he doesn't look back while he's leading her out. So he's coming out of Hades and she's following him. And guess what?
He has to look back.
It's a tragedy. He looks back and and she is lost forever. So that's the story. And so in this telling of it, which is subtle, like I don't think I would not have picked up that it was a retelling of Orpheus and Eurydice, but knowing that kind of does overlay and kind of make it loom larger as you read it, and I liked that. But it's gender swapped, so she is the amazing musician, and he's the one who I guess is drawn into the giant dark, and she wants to follow him. But I don't want to give too many details about what that actually means and how that happens.
No, I don't want to give too much away. But you did mention the fans are part of this as well. What's their role in the story? How do they sort of change what happens?
Yeah, so they you just have these sort of interlude chapters throughout, and it begins with them. It begins with their account of who she is. And I think she's a really interesting character because she's quite, she's sort of just like a clueless, not really sure of herself 30-year-old, but she's phenomenally famous and beloved. But she kind of feels aloof from the people in her life. She's always touring. Like she sort of doesn't feel that grown up or that loved necessarily until she gets back together with Ehsan. So you get the perspective of her fans for whom she is this kind of mythic creature. And they just think that she understands them to the depths of their souls, and they get like tattoos of her lyrics, and, she's there with them as they kind of grow up and like discover things about life, and she is their guiding star and all this stuff. So I really enjoyed the theme of celebrity in the novel, and her sense of like the power dynamics of that in their relationship, because she's the famous one and the rich one, but also he's the one who broke up with her 10 years ago and she's never really gotten over it. And so that kind of like, does he really love me? And then of course the love of her fans of this kind of Greek chorus, which they don't know her, and she's a very private person. So they're kind of obsessive about finding out things about her, but she gives them very little. There's this great thing where like she always dresses in a particular way on stage. She has this very kind of cultivated persona, which is very kind of plain clothes and a lot of like dark clothes and things. But then when she goes out anonymously, when she's touring in a city, she wears very girly dresses and stuff. And so there'll be like a photo of her on Instagram where someone's like, oh, she ate at this restaurant. And they're like, that's not her. She would never dress like that. So she has this very kind of public-private divide. And I think having the chorus there really helps you to see that, like, here's what she's like behind closed doors. And it's really nothing like how they see her, but they really feel like they have ownership of this person and they love her so much more than anyone else could.
Given this is a story about a lover and maybe their muse in some ways, does the book have anything to say about, creative inspiration or the cost of having that strong creative drive?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting picture of that, actually. So Ehsan is also he's a poet. At the beginning of the novel, he's quit his job in a publishing house because he really wants to kind of pursue his writing, and he just feels like he's at a bit of a dead end. And, for both of them, I think there have been sacrifices of sort of normal life in order to pursue what they love. And so they kind of both look around at, their friends and the people they know who are settling down, who are having families, who are building careers, and they feel, even though she has been hugely successful and reached this mythic status, she sort of doesn't have a life. And so I think they both feel a bit like, oh, is our art worth this? Like, what am I even doing? Am I happy? Does it make me happy? So I think it's quite a nice study of celebrity, of the making of art, of what it means to other people, but kind of what it does to them as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what about the romance? Was it a good choice to read on your honeymoon? I mean, maybe there are other people listening who want honeymoon reading suggestions as well.
I think it was, because I really loved the writing and it was quite thought-provoking, but it wasn't like heavy. I mean, it was a little bit tragic. Not necessarily the ending, I'm not giving anything away, but just the vibe of it is quite tragic and intense. But I also really liked their relationship. I mean, they kind of meet, and their initial kind of few months together is in London. It was a very London book in some ways, and that's fun. I haven't been to London for a long time. London is cool. And so all they're kind of, trying to make it as artists and musicians and stuff in London with all their friends when they're in their early 20s. So I really enjoyed that sense of, this is how real people in this kind of social set, in these kinds of circumstances, talk. And it also, like, there are so many elements to this. There's a whole, she's obsessed with like a vampire romance novel, which kind of, I cannot explain to you how that features, but, it adds something. And then also she's Indian background and he is Pakistani background. And so there's kind of these other sort of mythic strands going in there as well. Like, there's a lot happening, but she weaves it together so beautifully.
It sounds like you wouldn't necessarily have to know the Greek mythology or even, the cultural other mythology to just get it on a surface level.
No, it's just a lovely, like, contemporary novel as well.
Sounds great. Well, thanks, Natasha.
Thank you.
That's Natasha Moore, newly married, and she's been reading The Giant Dark by Sarvat Hasin, a modern-day love story loosely based on the Greek tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice. Katrina Clifford has been reading a World War II romance, The Paris Library by Janet Skeslien Charles. This is based on the true story of the heroic librarians at the American Library in Paris. It's told in two timelines, Paris in 1939 and Montana in 1983. It's a story of romance, friendship, family, and of course, the power of books to bring people together. Welcome, Katrina.
Thank you.
I'm glad to see you're a little bit more rested than last time we recorded when you'd been in emergency all night.
I am. Thank you very much. It's always better to not be in hospital if you can manage it.
That's right. All right. So we're going to start with our main character, Odile, in 1939. What's going on for her in that part of the book?
Sure. So Odile is a young woman, a young French woman living in Paris. She has this experience growing up where her aunt's husband walks out on her. and her aunt, as a divorced woman, is kind of cast out of society. She doesn't have a job. She can't kind of look after herself. And Odile learns from this experience that she can't rely on a man and she can't rely on marriage, that she is going to need to work out how to support herself. So she studies really hard. She loves reading. She loves English, and she manages to get herself a job at the American Library in Paris. Because of her really strong English skills. And she starts working there just before World War II breaks out. And so then we see what happens to her as she stays in Paris. The library stays open throughout the war, and so she keeps her job at the library. And we see occupied Paris. We see the interactions between the Parisians who stay and the German occupying soldiers, what that does to the community of people who are there, including a bunch of expats, some of whom stay and some of whom leave. But also alongside this, she has this growing relationship with a young man named Paul. And you get a kind of sense of what does it mean to be courting in a time of war when your city is under occupation.
Yeah. And so there's also this other timeline set in 1983 in Montana when Odile is a little old lady and making friends with the teenager next door, Lily. What brings this unlikely pair together?
Yeah, Lily is a young girl who at the start of the novel, her mother is really unwell. Her mother dies quite soon after the novel starts. So it's not a particularly huge giveaway. But she's a really lost teenager. She feels the absence of her maternal figure really keenly. But she set this school assignment that she needs to learn something about France. And so she knows there's this little old French woman who lives down the road who doesn't ever talk to anybody and keeps to herself. But Lily has a school assignment to do. And so she knocks on Odile's door and says, "Can I ask you some questions about France?"
Mm.
And they start this relationship between this teenager who's really lost and Odile, who has also lost her husband, lost her son, is very isolated. Odile takes Lily in and gives her French lessons and teaches her to cook French food and eventually gives her a beret and sends her off to Paris. And the relationship that develops between them as they really support each other through a period of disruption and isolation is a really beautiful part of the novel.
Well, it's really interesting. When I've read a lot of reviews, it seems like a lot of readers prefer one timeline over the other. They either love the World War II one and just wanted to get back to that each time, or maybe they really loved the 80s setting and kept wanting to get back to that. Was there one that you were more immersed in than the other?
Look, honestly, the first half of the novel, I was really immersed in the World War II narrative. And then somewhere in the middle, I suddenly decided that I really liked Lily and I just really wanted to know what happened to her. And so I had this funny shift that the first half kept me in World War II for the first half of the novel. And then, I don't care about that anymore. Let's go back to Montana and see what happens to Lily. But I genuinely enjoyed both parts of it. I thought they were both very well done, very different, but both very well done.
Okay, so what did you like about this novel?
I don't read a lot of romance. I find romance generally doesn't hold my interest. But this book, the love story between Odile and Paul is very significant. I really liked that Odile's a very independent young woman, and that's what Paul loves about her. He loves her intelligence and her dedication to her work and the fact that she reads and they talk about books together. But it wasn't the focus of the story. It was just kind of one thing that was going on amidst this World War II narrative. What I really liked about the romance aspect of it, I think, was seeing romance in this very particular context of what does it mean to be falling in love when you've got soldiers marching down on your city, when there's not enough to eat, when people are going off to war and she's worried about her brother who signs up as a soldier. What does that situation do to the individuals involved, and what does it do to the relationship between them, especially in a situation where the relationship is forming and growing and developing? They're not married. They haven't kind of got this 30-year history behind them to draw on. What does war do to people? What does occupation do to people? But I love books about books. And so a book that's, set around a library is always a good thing. There's a lot about the power of reading and the power of literature and the power of books, particularly in stressful situations.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you about that because, it struck me that in a time of, book burnings and propaganda and the truth being hard to get hold of, that the books and the story probably symbolise a lot more than just books. I imagine that a library represents democracy and freedom and civilised society and culture, education. Did this give the story a bit of resonance for today, given that in these times we have some similar sort of, struggles going on for freedom of speech and things like that?
Yeah, I think it did. Although I think what it did even more than that was the sense of how in a time of nationalism, a library can be a place that crosses borders. Reading can be an international experience. And so because this is the American library, there are people from all sorts of different cultural backgrounds, expats from all over the world who meet and work in the Paris library. So there's people from America and people from London, and there's a couple of people from Russia, people from all over the place, and people who are not necessarily on the same side in the war, but they have reading in common. There's also a really strong thread through the novel about the Jewish readers who would come to the library and what happens to them in occupied Paris. And they're not allowed to keep coming to the library. The library's not allowed to keep on serving them. And so how do the librarians kind of stay in touch with them and keep them connected to the library? And so I think there's very much that sense of the world might be falling apart, but books is something that we still have in common. Learning is something that it's a universal language, and people who love books can love each other, even if the world tells them that they should be enemies and that they should be at war. So I really found that a really lovely hooray books kind of moment.
Yeah, it sounds like a romance with a lot more going on than just the romance. But, I have to ask you this because Natasha and I have, in our time doing this podcast, we have reviewed a lot of World War II books set in Paris and various other places. So, did you feel that this was bringing something new to the table? Was it worth your time to visit this setting for this book?
Yeah, look, I think because it alternated the World War II scenes with the 1980s Montana, that gave a bit of a different sense to it. It wasn't just a World War II book. It's also not primarily a book about war. So a lot of the books that I've read are about, spies in Paris and infiltrating the Nazis and those kinds of heroic books. That's not what this is. This is more kind of a day-to-day life of a regular person. But I think because you see Odile as an old lady who's moved to the States and lived a whole life since her wartime experience. Part of what is interesting about the book is piecing together what happened in her life in Paris such that she ended up an isolated old woman in Montana 40 years later. How did she get there? Which I think is a different thing to what you see in most World War II books. Look, if you like World War II books, you'll probably enjoy this. If you like books about books, you'll probably enjoy this. If you don't like either of those things, you should probably go and read something else.
Unless you're a romance fan in general.
Unless you're a romance fan, in which case you'll probably enjoy this.
Okay. Thank you, Katrina. That's Katrina Clifford. We've been talking about The Paris Library by Janet Skeslien Charles. So, look, you touched on, Katrina, the fact that you don't read a lot of romance. I also don't read a lot of romance. I used to read chick lit about 20 years ago, which I guess is a particular form of romance, but really have often found that it's not enough for me to keep me reading. I want a good story with some romantic elements, as opposed to reading romance. But what I do find more interesting often are the real life stories. So I have another podcast I do, Australia's Invisible History, where we talk about people who've done great things in Australia's history. And I have stumbled upon quite a few interesting couples who have shared a vision. And I think you get this a little bit when you read Michelle Obama's Becoming as well, the sense of that relationship being really formative in the background of everything she did. And I came across this beautiful couple, Sir Doug and Lady Gladys Nichols, very significant in South Australia, Natasha, because he was
first Aboriginal governor of a state of Australia. South Australia.
And what I love about this story is she was actually married to his brother. And when her husband died, Sir Doug stepped up to take care of Gladys and provide for the children. But they went on to have this amazing partnership as activists and, really leaders for their people, and were very significant in bringing about, civil rights for Aboriginal people. And so I found that quite sexy, in a different way, and they've got a statue together in Melbourne where it's the two of them arm in arm and they worked for that common life purpose. So I think that's romantic. So I wonder if either of you have couples like that you've come across, or maybe biographies you've read where you've gone, I just really like this relationship.
Oh, the one I was thinking of, one of the poets that I wrote my PhD on, it was Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who many people will have heard of. And her most famous, kind of couplet is, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." Continues on.
Lovely.
Yes. So she's kind of known for writing romantic poetry, though mostly she wrote other stuff. She wrote a lot of kind of social justice stuff. But famous romance of the 19th century, Elizabeth Barrett and Robert Browning. Poetry.
That's where the name comes from.
That's right. Yeah. So you don't know their story.
I didn't know their story.
Oh, it's an amazing story because she's maybe 7 years older than him. She's an invalid at this point. She's the famous poet. He's the just starting out, admirer of hers. But she's kind of from this family where her father's very controlling of his children and very worried about them. And when they get married, he cuts them off. He doesn't want them to get married.
Uh-huh.
And she's kind of been kept as an invalid, she is unwell, but the doctors are like, oh, you should go to Italy. And her father's like, no, we're not doing that. And she's like, oh, come on. And Robert Browning starts writing her letters because of her poetry, and they kind of fall in love over correspondence. We have their love letters. And then later she does write a set of sonnets, which are love sonnets, while they're married. So
I suppose someone's already written this into a book, have they?
There are various things. I think there's a play. I'm sure, there must be books about it as well. So they elope to Italy and live there for the duration of their marriage and, have a child later. So, they have this wonderful story, which I think is very romantic. And also they write a lot of letters and I really like that.
That's very romantic. See, that just really captivated me, whereas a lot of these fictional romances don't to the same degree. So I think that's gorgeous. What about you, Katrina? Any ideas?
I'm so suspicious of romance stories.
We're so jaded.
I was just chatting to a friend just this morning and we were talking about how actually marriage is really hard. And I think we can give ourselves this sense of, oh, you fall in love and everything's wonderful for the rest of your life.
What are you talking about? It's great, Katrina.
Sorry.
These 7 weeks have been really fun.
Marriage is wonderful and I'm sure you'll never have any problems ever. So
the expression on your face, Katrina, I wish everyone could see it. Marriage is really hard. I'd like to second that.
Yep, that's what everyone says. Yeah, I believe you.
Anybody who's being honest about it will agree with that. It's good, but it's hard and you need to work at it. And so I get very go for your life, elope to Italy with the, guy who's been writing you love letters. That sounds lovely. But also, seriously, they had to come home at some point and there must have been problems.
Oh, no, they lived there for the rest of their life. They made their life in Italy. But they had lots of money problems. They're poets and, she had miscarriages and she was still unwell. And, it was not all
But don't you know if you move to Italy, your life instantly becomes perfect and all your problems
I've seen those
will
movies.
leave you instantly? Yeah. That's pretty much Still Life by Sarah Winman. Everyone who moves to Italy, suddenly their life
That's
gets
the
better.
mistake we're all making, is it, in our marriages?
Really?
Sorry, Katrina.
So a story that I like, which is a friend of mine, because it's just a little bit more real, tells the story of the start of her honeymoon. They decided to go to Tasmania for their honeymoon and they got on the boat at Sydney to go down to Tasmania, and her brand new husband was horribly, horribly seasick, and the cabin that they were in was for some reason full of smoke, and so they couldn't actually sit in the cabin that they were supposed to be in, and there were no other free cabins, and so he ends up kind of lying on the floor of their cabin with his head out the door with a bucket because he's so unwell. And she, since they've been married for, 48 hours or something like this, in this horrible, horrible situation. And when she tells the story, she says she just remembers looking at him and thinking not, oh, this is just the worst disaster ever, but just thinking, like, this is what I signed up for. I signed up for in sickness and in health, and here's the sickness, and I love this man, and I'm really glad that I married him. And what a good, starting point for a relationship, to kind of have the difficulties straight away and to experience that together and to go, we can do this together because we love each other and we will look after each other. So there you go. That's my little story for today.
Oh, thank you. Very relevant. I'm sure we all have sickness, and Natasha got married and had sickness immediately by breaking her arm.
So I've been married 7 weeks and broke my arm 3 weeks ago. So yes, we've got the better and worse right up front.
Yeah. And, I pretty much also got married as a result of breaking my arm. Because when I broke my arm, I was going out with my now husband, and I think it was a turning point in the relationship, because he kind of then felt responsible to look after me. I didn't have any family around. He stepped up, and I think he felt like, oh, maybe I do like this girl. I'm wanting to look after her. Like, as in it was kind of that moment, I think. Well, I have been reading Meredith Resce's book, In Want of a Wife. I love the title. I thought, that drew me. Meredith is also an Adelaide-based author. We've had a lot of Adelaide theme this morning, Natasha. Good. You may bump into her at some stage. Lovely person. But I was recently at the Amiga Writers Conference on the Gold Coast, and this title won the Caleb Prize for Fiction. So I thought it would be a good choice for the long journey back home. Plus, I wanted to read a romance book for this episode, and the other ones I'd read, I didn't feel I could actually recommend them. So this one is a cute rom-com about an outspoken A&E nurse, Chloe, who gets an unjust speeding ticket on her way home from night shift. Chloe's a feminist. She's very frustrated by her mother's matchmaking attempts. So she's a very independent woman. She doesn't need a man to make her life complete. However, Chloe's mother, a pen name, Luella Lindley, a real name, Louise Brooker, is a Regency romance author who is rather overbearing and interferes in the lives of her children a bit too much. So she's already got one successful match under her belt in book one. She now turns her attention to her second daughter, Chloe. So Louise, the mum, meets Michael Sullivan, a lawyer with quite a troubled background. And when she offers to set him up on a date with Chloe, he jumps at the chance because he has mistakenly given his boss the impression he is engaged. And so he needs a date for a week-long staff retreat to the Gold Coast.
Oh, my. Week-long date. Okay.
Yeah. So Chloe and Michael kind of agree to a fake engagement. Chloe just wants a lawyer to help her with her speeding ticket, but she also sees a chance to put her interfering mother in her place. And, of course, the two end up falling in love, but Michael has a few hang-ups that need to be sorted out before they can be together. Basically, Chloe's habit of speaking her mind sort of rocks the boat amongst his colleagues, and Michael's insecurities about his past is sort of on a collision course with her outspokenness. So that leads to quite a bit of grief for both of them. So, this is actually like an inverted commas Christian romance, and it's the first one I've read for a very long time. Yeah. So I was a little bit like, oh, how's this going to go? But I think the first thing a romance really has to do is make you care about the characters enough that you actually want them to end up together. And some of the books that I've read recently haven't done that.
But this one did.
Yeah, I felt like there was a lot more going on between the couple than just the sort of sexual attraction. There was like this spark, but there was this genuine connection in their conversation, and you kind of felt their distress when they couldn't be together. So it was clear they would be a good couple in a lot of ways. But I did find it a little bit funny as Christian fiction, like when the characters were in extreme distress, and because there's no swearing in the book, it was sort of like gosh and damn and blast and sort of thing, which was quite funny. And then also there's the sex issue, like because, most couples in the 21st century contemporary fiction just sort of go to bed, their choice to wait until marriage had to be really explained a couple of times, as they sort of both pulled away when things got heated. So it was that.
So the characters are Christian?
Yeah, the characters are Christian.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there is that kind of attraction, but then like, oh, this is, it was kind of cute. Overall, I think it was a good thing.
It sounds like it has some good like Austen-y vibes there.
Definitely Austen-y vibes because, and this is the thing, this is what I liked about it. So as the mum is writing her Regency romance, we get little snippets of that story and they kind of, it mirrors or correlates with what's going on for Chloe and Michael. So we sort of see the author trying to wrangle her fictional characters towards each other, but having trouble to actually bring them together in a way that's convincing. And so that kind of, that's kind of fun. I like that part of it. So it's almost like a clean version of Bridget Jones' Diary or Stranger Than Fiction or something in the way that there's that fictional element to it, and definitely Austen and Bronte sort of overtones in there as well.
So you'll be reading some more Christian fiction, Katrina?
I mean, I'd happily read the other books in this series. I can't read every book that's out there. I'm worried I'm now going to get inundated with people sending me Christian fiction to review. So I can't always do that. But look, what I did want to do, given this book has won an award, I think it is nice to highlight something that's locally written, that's a cute, clean romance, and that I think a lot of readers would enjoy. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Hope you've enjoyed listening to our romance episode of the Hope Book Club. It might be a while before we do another one. But if you want to share your thoughts about any of the books we've talked about or recommend a book, you can email us bookclub@hopemedia.com.au. In this edition, we have reviewed The Giant Dark, the debut novel by Sarvat Hasin, The Paris Library by Janet Skeslien Charles, and In Want of a Wife by Meredith Resce. Thanks for listening to the Hope Book Club, because life's just better with a book.
Hope 103.2. Thanks for listening.